3 days after my ex-wife married another man, she called me in tears, begging for help. But by then, she had already destroyed the only bridge that could have saved her. Have you ever watched someone throw away everything you built together, only to come crawling back after realizing they made the biggest mistake of their life? Because that's exactly what happened to me. The funny thing is, I never planned revenge. Life did it for me. And when karma finally arrived, it was far more ruthless than anything I could have imagined. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay until the end. Because today's story proves one unforgettable truth: sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't getting even. It's watching the people who underestimated you lose everything on their own. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 46 years old, born and raised in Colorado, and until 1 year ago, I believed I had the kind of marriage most people spent their lives searching for. Turns out, I was the only one who believed it. Before I tell you about the divorce, before I tell you about the hospital, before I tell you why my ex-wife ended up sobbing into the phone, begging for another chance, you need to understand the man I used to be. I owned a structural engineering company that specialized in inspecting bridges, commercial buildings, and elevated highways. It wasn't glamorous. Most people never noticed our work. They only noticed when something collapsed. That responsibility weighed heavily on me every single day. While the world hurried across steel bridges without a second thought, I was the man crawling underneath them in freezing weather, checking bolts, welds, and concrete for tiny cracks that could one day cost innocent people their lives. It was exhausting work, dangerous work, but it paid incredibly well. The funny part? Almost nobody knew, especially not my wife. Her name was Vanessa. When we met 16 years earlier, she loved how simple I was. She laughed at my terrible jokes. She reached for my hand before I reached for hers. She made me believe that quiet men could still be deeply loved. Somewhere along the way, that woman disappeared. At first it was small things. She stopped asking how my day had gone. She rolled her eyes whenever I talked about work. At dinner parties, she'd introduce me with an embarrassed smile. "Oh, Ethan? He works with bridges or something." Or something. Those 3 words hurt far more than she ever realized. I smiled every time. Pretended it didn't matter. But inside, it felt like watching someone erase my entire identity one sentence at a time. Then came the comparisons. Derek bought his wife a new Mercedes. Olivia and her husband are flying to Italy again. Everyone else is moving forward. The message was always the same. Everyone else's husband was enough. Apparently, I wasn't. What Vanessa never knew was that I wasn't struggling financially. Not even close. My late father had taught me something I'd never forgotten. The moment people fall in love with your money instead of your character, you've already lost. So I drove my old pickup. I wore faded work shirts. I never bragged. I never flashed success. I wanted someone to love me, not my bank account. Looking back now, that decision revealed exactly who my wife really was. I just didn't know it yet. And then, one cold Sunday morning, 40 feet above a roaring river, my heart exploded inside my chest. In less than 60 seconds, everything I believed about my marriage would begin to collapse. I still remember the exact color of the sky. Crystal blue. Not a single cloud. The kind of morning that tricks you into believing nothing bad could possibly happen. My foreman, Marcus Reed, was 20 feet away, crouched beneath a pedestrian bridge with a flashlight in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "You're buying lunch today," he shouted. I laughed. "Only if you stop complaining about your knees." He grinned. "You'll understand when you're my age." I was about to fire back another joke when it happened. Without warning, a burning pain ripped through my chest. Not pressure, not tightness. It felt as if someone had reached inside my body and torn my heart in half. My breath vanished. The steel beam beneath my boots blurred. The world tilted. "Ethan." Marcus dropped everything and sprinted toward me. I grabbed the safety cable, desperate to stay standing, but my legs refused to listen. The harness dug into my shoulders as I collapsed. Every heartbeat felt like an explosion. Every breath became a fight. My ears filled with ringing. Then, nothing. When I opened my eyes again, white lights stared back at me. Machines beeped steadily beside my bed. My throat burned from the breathing tube that had only recently been removed. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the pain arrived. A deep, crushing ache stretching from my throat to the middle of my chest. The surgeon walked in carrying my chart. I'm Dr. Nathan Collins. His expression told me everything before he spoke. You suffered an acute aortic dissection. I frowned. I don't understand. The main artery leaving your heart tore apart. Silence. He pulled a chair beside my bed. You were in surgery for nearly 7 hours. I swallowed painfully. And he looked directly into my eyes. You almost didn't make it. Those 4 words echoed louder than any hospital machine. Almost didn't make it. My entire future had nearly ended on a bridge I'd inspected hundreds of times. You've been given another chance, he continued. But recovery won't be easy. I nodded slowly. I could handle recovery. I could handle pain. What I wasn't prepared for was learning how little my own wife cared whether I survived. Marcus finally woke from the uncomfortable hospital chair beside my bed. The exhaustion on his face made it obvious he hadn't gone home. You stubborn idiot, he laughed, rubbing his eyes. You scared 10 years off my life. I smiled weakly. Where's Vanessa? The smile disappeared from his face. He hesitated. Too long. She came. Came? He looked away. The night of your surgery. Relief washed over me. At least she'd been there. I knew she wouldn't leave me alone. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the floor. Something inside me tightened. What happened? He sighed heavily before speaking. The surgeon explained you might not survive. I waited. She signed the consent papers. I nodded. Of course. Then Marcus quietly added, she never asked how likely you were to live. The room suddenly felt colder. What? She signed every document without asking a single question. I blinked. No. His voice became almost a whisper. She asked where the nearest restroom was. Nothing else. No tears. No panic. No request to see me. No desperate plea for the doctors to save her husband. Just directions to the restroom. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe she'd cried before arriving. Maybe Marcus misunderstood, because the woman I married couldn't possibly be that cold. Right? I clung to that hope for nearly a week, until Vanessa visited. She didn't rush to my bedside. She didn't kiss my forehead. She didn't squeeze my hand. Instead, she stood near the door, checking her phone while I struggled to sit upright. You look better, she said flatly. I almost died. I know. Silence. Then her first real question came. So, what did the doctors say? Relief flooded through me. Finally, she cared. I smiled faintly. They think I'll recover. She shook her head. No, I mean, her eyes narrowed. Will you actually be able to work again? That single question hit harder than the surgery ever had. Not, are you okay? Not, how are you feeling? Not even. I was terrified. Only one thing mattered to her, whether I could still earn money. And as she tucked her phone back into her handbag, a voice deep inside me whispered something I desperately didn't want to believe. The woman standing in front of me wasn't worried about losing her husband. She was worried about losing her future. Crystal blue. Not a single cloud. The kind of morning that tricks you into believing nothing bad could possibly happen. My foreman, Marcus Reed, was 20 feet away, crouched beneath a pedestrian bridge with a flashlight in one hand and a clipboard in the other. You're buying lunch today, he shouted. I laughed. Only if you stop complaining about your knees. He grinned. You'll understand when you're my age. I was about to fire back another joke when it happened. Without warning, a burning pain ripped through my chest. Not pressure, not tightness. It felt as if someone had reached inside my body and torn my heart in half. My breath vanished. The steel beam beneath my boots blurred. The world tilted. Ethan. Marcus dropped everything and sprinted toward me. I grabbed the safety cable, desperate to stay standing, but my legs refused to listen. The harness dug into my shoulders as I collapsed. Every heartbeat felt like an explosion. Every breath became a fight. My ears filled with ringing. Then, nothing. When I opened my eyes again, white lights stared back at me. Machines beeped steadily beside my bed. My throat burned from the breathing tube that had only recently been removed. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the pain arrived. A deep, crushing ache stretching from my throat to the middle of my chest. The surgeon walked in carrying my chart. I'm Dr. Nathan Collins. His expression told me everything before he spoke. You suffered an acute aortic dissection. I frowned. I don't understand. The main artery leaving your heart tore apart. Silence. He pulled a chair beside my bed. You were in surgery for nearly 7 hours. I swallowed painfully. And he looked directly into my eyes. You almost didn't make it. Those 4 words echoed louder than any hospital machine. Almost. Didn't. Make it. My entire future had nearly ended on a bridge I'd inspected hundreds of times. You've been given another chance, he continued. But recovery won't be easy. I nodded slowly. I could handle recovery. I could handle pain. What I wasn't prepared for was learning how little my own wife cared whether I survived. Marcus finally woke from the uncomfortable hospital chair beside my bed. The exhaustion on his face made it obvious he hadn't gone home. You stubborn idiot, he laughed, rubbing his eyes. You scared 10 years off my life. I smiled weakly. Where's Vanessa? The smile disappeared from his face. He hesitated. Too long. She came. Came? He looked away. The night of your surgery. Relief washed over me. At least she'd been there. I knew she wouldn't leave me alone. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the floor. Something inside me tightened. What happened? He sighed heavily before speaking. The surgeon explained you might not survive. I waited. She signed the consent papers. I nodded. Of course. Then Marcus quietly added, she never asked how likely you were to live. The room suddenly felt colder. What? She signed every document without asking a single question. I blinked. No. His voice became almost a whisper. She asked where the nearest restroom was. Nothing else. No tears. No panic. No request to see me. No desperate plea for the doctors to save her husband. Just directions to the restroom. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe she'd cried before arriving. Maybe Marcus misunderstood, because the woman I married couldn't possibly be that cold. Right? I clung to that hope for nearly a week. Until Vanessa visited. She didn't rush to my bedside. She didn't kiss my forehead. She didn't squeeze my hand. Instead, she stood near the door, checking her phone while I struggled to sit upright. You look better, she said flatly. I almost died. I know. Silence, then her first real question came. So, what did the doctors say? Relief flooded through me. Finally, she cared. I smiled faintly. They think I'll recover. She shook her head. No, her eyes narrowed. Will you actually be able to work again? That single question hit harder than the surgery ever had. Not, are you okay? Not, how are you feeling? Not even, I was terrified. Only one thing mattered to her. Whether I could still earn money. And as she tucked her phone back into her handbag, a voice deep inside me whispered something I desperately didn't want to believe. The woman standing in front of me wasn't worried about losing her husband. She was worried about losing her future. Part 3 The envelope that ended everything people think betrayal happens in one dramatic moment. A screaming match. A confession. A slammed door. They're wrong. Real betrayal is quiet. It walks into your hospital room wearing polished shoes, carrying a manila envelope, and speaks only 4 words. You've been served. 9 days after my surgery, I was sitting up for the first time without feeling like my chest was going to split open. Every movement hurt. Even breathing felt like hard work. Marcus was reading the morning news from the chair beside my bed when someone knocked on the door. A woman I'd never seen before stepped inside. Mr. Ethan Carter? Yes? She held out a thick envelope. You've been officially served. Marcus stood up immediately. Served with what? She didn't answer him. She simply placed the envelope on my lap, nodded politely, and walked away. The room became painfully silent. I looked down at my own name printed across the front. My hands began to shake. Slowly, I opened it. The first page hit me like another heart attack. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce. My vision blurred. There had to be some mistake. This couldn't be real. Vanessa wouldn't file for divorce while I was lying in intensive care. She wouldn't, would she? Marcus leaned over my shoulder, reading every page with me. His jaw tightened. What the hell? I kept turning pages. Request for the family home. Request for both vehicles. Request for temporary financial authority. Request for immediate division of marital assets due to my uncertain medical condition. My stomach twisted. She wasn't waiting to see whether I'd recover. She was preparing for life without me, before I had even left the hospital. Then I noticed the date. The documents had been filed while I was still unconscious. While doctors were fighting to keep me alive, my wife had already begun planning her exit. Marcus slammed his fist against the bedside table. I can't believe this. Neither could I. For 16 years I'd trusted this woman with every part of my life, and now she was treating my illness like a business opportunity. That afternoon I called my attorney. Her name was Olivia Bennett, and she'd handled my company's legal work for nearly a decade. She arrived within an hour carrying a leather briefcase and an expression I had never seen before. Concern, mixed with anger. She carefully spread the divorce papers across the hospital tray. Then she looked at me. "Ethan, I need you to think carefully." I nodded. "A few days ago," she continued. "Did Vanessa ask you to sign anything?" I frowned. "Just hospital paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" "I don't know. My medication was strong. She said it was to help pay bills while I recovered." Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, almost as if she'd been hoping I would give a different answer. "Ethan, I need you to listen very carefully. Those weren't ordinary hospital forms." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She slid another document in front of me. "One of the papers you signed granted Vanessa temporary financial power of attorney." I stared at her. "No, yes, she now has legal authority over several of your personal accounts." My mouth went dry. "Can she actually do that?" Olivia nodded slowly. "Only because you signed while heavily medicated. And judging by these bank records," she paused. "She's already started using it." It felt as though someone had punched the air from my lungs. "What has she done?" "2 savings accounts have been emptied." I couldn't speak. "Your pickup truck has been transferred." Still nothing. "And she's attempted to move additional marital assets before the divorce hearing." I looked down at my scar. Fresh stitches stretched across my chest. I had trusted my wife so completely that I'd signed away my own protection while I was barely conscious. Tears burned behind my eyes, not because of the money. Money could always be earned again. What broke me was realizing the woman I'd promised forever had waited until I was too weak to defend myself. Olivia gently closed the folder. "She's gambling that you'll stay sick long enough to lose everything." I finally found my voice. "Can she win?" For the first time since entering the room, Olivia smiled. "No." She leaned closer. "The dates tell the whole story. You were under heavy medication. You were medically vulnerable. And every document she touched is now under serious legal scrutiny." She folded her hands. "Ethan, she thinks she's burying you." A slow fire began to replace the pain inside my chest. For days I'd felt powerless, broken, abandoned. But for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I realized something. Vanessa had made one enormous mistake. She assumed I would never be strong enough to fight back. She had no idea. She had just given me the biggest reason to survive. People often imagine revenge as anger. Explosive, violent, immediate. They couldn't be more wrong. Real revenge begins in silence. It begins the moment you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "What do I do next?" That was the day I stopped being a victim. Recovering from open-heart surgery wasn't heroic. There were no dramatic training montages, no triumphant music, just endless pain. Every morning I woke up feeling as if someone had parked a truck on my chest. Simple tasks became mountains. Taking a shower, walking to the mailbox, getting out of bed without using my arms. The doctors warned me not to lift anything heavier than 5 pounds. I couldn't even pour a full kettle without feeling my heartbeat race. The physical pain was brutal. But it wasn't the worst part. The worst part arrived every evening. That's when the house became quiet. Too quiet. Vanessa was gone. The photographs had disappeared. Her clothes were gone. Her perfume no longer lingered in the hallway. 16 years of memories had vanished in less than 2 weeks. It was as if someone had erased our marriage with the click of a button. I moved into my mother's home while the legal battle continued. She never asked questions. She never pressured me to talk. Instead, every morning she quietly placed breakfast on the table beside my medication. Every evening she reminded me that healing wasn't weakness. One afternoon she found me sitting alone on the porch, staring at the scar running down my chest. Without saying a word, she handed me a mug of coffee and sat beside me. After several minutes of silence, she finally spoke. "You know what your father used to say?" I smiled faintly. "I remember." She nodded. "Steel isn't tested in the factory. It's tested under pressure." Those words settled deep inside me. I'd spent my entire career inspecting bridges. I knew something most people didn't. Structures rarely collapse because of one giant crack. They fail because hundreds of tiny fractures go unnoticed. My marriage had been exactly the same. Vanessa didn't suddenly become selfish. She'd been showing me who she was for years. The expensive vacations she envied, the wealthy husbands she admired, the way she introduced me as if my career embarrassed her, the insults disguised as jokes, the coldness whenever I chose simplicity over status. I ignored every warning sign, because love has a strange habit of repainting red flags. Meanwhile, Olivia Bennett was quietly dismantling everything Vanessa believed she'd won. Every few days she'd call with another update. The bank has frozen the transferred accounts. The court accepted our medical evidence. The judge has agreed to review the power of attorney. Each phone call brought another crack to Vanessa's carefully built plan. Then one afternoon, Olivia walked into my mother's living room, carrying a thick folder. She placed it on the coffee table and smiled. "I've been investigating." I looked up. "And? Your ex-wife made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that changes everything." She opened the folder. Inside were financial records, property documents, emails, business filings. "Vanessa believed your personal savings were your entire fortune." I nodded. She never knew about Carter Structural Solutions. I had intentionally kept my company separate from our household finances, not to hide it, to protect it. My father had founded the business 30 years earlier with little more than determination, borrowed tools, and a relentless work ethic. Before he passed away, he made me promise one thing: never let anyone measure your worth by your wealth. I kept that promise. Even my own wife never knew the company's real value. Olivia looked at me over the folder. "Ethan, your business isn't worth hundreds of thousands." I frowned. "It's worth several million." Even after everything I'd lost, the company remained untouched. The long-term government contracts, the commercial inspection agreements, the engineering licenses, every bit of it, protected. Vanessa had fought viciously over the house, the SUV, the furniture, the bank accounts. But she'd ignored the one asset that truly mattered. Because she never bothered to ask what I actually owned. She simply assumed. Olivia couldn't hide her smile. She thought she divorced an ordinary contractor. I looked out of the window as sunlight spilled across my mother's garden. "No," I said quietly. "She divorced the man who built everything she ever admired." For the first time since my heart nearly gave out, I wasn't thinking about surviving anymore. I was thinking about rebuilding. And somewhere across town, Vanessa was celebrating a victory that only existed because she didn't yet know the truth. People think revenge has to be planned. They imagine secret meetings, hidden cameras, elaborate schemes. But sometimes, the universe writes a better ending than you ever could. All you have to do is stay alive long enough to watch it happen. Nearly 3 months after my surgery, I was finally driving again. Not far. Just to physical therapy, the grocery store, and back to my mother's house. Every mile felt like another piece of my independence returning. The scar on my chest still ached whenever the weather changed, but something inside me had changed too. The bitterness was fading. In its place came clarity. Vanessa hadn't destroyed my life. She'd exposed the people who never deserved a place in it. Then one Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed. Marcus. The second I answered, I knew something was different. He wasn't just excited. He was trying not to laugh. "Ethan, you sitting down?" I smiled. "My cardiologist says that's still my favorite hobby." He chuckled. "Good, because you're going to enjoy this." I leaned back in my chair. "Tell me. You remember the luxury apartment project Vanessa's new husband was bragging about?" Walter, of course I remembered. The man she'd replaced 16 years of marriage with. The millionaire developer. The polished smile. The imported sports car. The man she believed had given her the glamorous life she'd always wanted. What about him? Marcus almost burst out laughing. "The retaining wall collapsed last night." My smile disappeared. "Anyone hurt?" "No, thank God." The underground parking garage was empty. I let out a slow breath. "What caused it?" "The county doesn't know yet. But they've shut the entire project down." I knew enough about engineering to understand what that meant. Construction delays, emergency investigations, investors asking questions, millions lost every week. Marcus continued, "It gets better. The county ordered a completely independent structural review." I frowned. "So?" "The engineering company that approved Walter's project is under investigation." Silence. And guess who the county trusts to review every public infrastructure failure in this region? I laughed quietly. Don't tell me. Marcus grinned through the phone. They asked Carter Structural Solutions to recommend the inspection team. For a moment I couldn't speak. Fate had just placed the man who stole my wife directly in front of the company she'd never even known existed. I closed my eyes. This was exactly the kind of conflict my father had warned me about. No, I finally said. I'm staying out of it. Marcus sounded surprised. Seriously? If I touch this case, Vanessa will claim I manipulated the investigation. So what now? We do everything by the book. No shortcuts. No personal involvement. No revenge. Marcus laughed. You're a better man than most. No, I answered quietly. I'm just done letting her control my decisions. 3 weeks later, the official investigation report became public. It was devastating. Inspectors discovered missing drainage systems beneath the retaining wall. Cheap materials had been substituted during construction. Critical soil testing had been skipped to save time. Safety reports had been altered. Corners had been cut everywhere. Exactly the kind of negligence my company had spent decades preventing. Within days, banks froze funding on Walter's remaining developments. Business partners began disappearing. Investors demanded repayment. Lawsuits piled up faster than his lawyers could answer them. Then came the headline that spread through the entire city. Real estate tycoon files for bankruptcy after structural failures. The same people who once fought for photographs beside Walter suddenly pretended they'd never met him. Luxury dinners stopped. Country club invitations vanished. His so-called friends disappeared overnight. Success attracts crowds. Failure reveals who was only there for the free ride. And Vanessa, she was trapped right in the middle of the collapse. Her social media became strangely quiet. The glamorous holiday photos disappeared. The expensive restaurant check-ins stopped. Even the designer handbags she'd proudly displayed online slowly vanished from her pictures. It didn't take long for rumors to spread. Her salon lost clients. Appointments were canceled. The women who once admired her suddenly found new hairstylists. The same circle she'd worked so hard to impress abandoned her without hesitation. Watching it unfold felt strange, not joyful, not cruel, just inevitable, because people who build relationships on money usually lose them the moment the money disappears. Meanwhile, my own life kept moving in the opposite direction. The state renewed our largest engineering contract, then expanded it. We hired 2 new engineers, opened another office. For the first time in company history, we crossed every financial goal my father had ever dreamed of. One afternoon, Olivia called with another update. The court hearing is next week. I nodded. Good. She paused. Ethan, I've been doing this for 23 years. I've never seen someone destroy their own future as completely as Vanessa. I looked through my office window at the old pickup parked outside. The same truck she'd mocked for years. The same truck she'd assumed belonged to a man with no ambition. I smiled to myself. She had spent 16 years looking at my life, without ever seeing it. And she still hadn't realized the worst consequence of her betrayal wasn't losing the lawsuit. It was losing the only man who had truly loved her before the money ever mattered. Success has a strange way of revealing people's true character. Failure does it even faster. 6 months after my surgery, I was back at work full-time. Not because I needed the money. Because I needed purpose. Every morning, I pulled on my steel toe boots, climbed beneath bridges, inspected concrete and steel, and reminded myself that strong foundations aren't built overnight. They're built through patience, through discipline, through doing the right thing when no one is watching. My heart was stronger. My business was thriving. And for the first time in years, so was I. Then, one Thursday evening, just after sunset, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it. Something told me not to. Hello? For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard it, soft sobbing. Ethan. My entire body froze. I'd know that voice anywhere. Vanessa. She sounded nothing like the confident woman who had walked away from 16 years of marriage. Her voice was shaky, broken, almost unrecognizable. I don't know who else to call. I leaned back in my chair and stared out across the lake behind my cabin. The water was perfectly still. Funny, nature always seemed peaceful when people's lives weren't. What do you want, Vanessa? Another long silence. I saw the article. What article? The one about your company. The government contracts. I didn't know. Her voice cracked. I swear, I didn't know. I closed my eyes. Of course. She finally knew. She had finally discovered what she'd never cared enough to ask during our marriage. Ethan, you never told me. I let out a slow breath. You never asked. Silence, heavy, painful. Then she whispered the sentence I'd been waiting months to hear. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Not, I'm sorry for hurting you. Not, I was selfish. Not, I betrayed your trust. Her biggest mistake was discovering too late that I'd been far more successful than she'd believed. I realized something in that exact moment. She still didn't understand. She wasn't grieving our marriage. She was grieving the future she'd imagined she'd thrown away. I thought you were dying, she admitted through tears. The doctors said you might not survive. I panicked. I thought everything we'd built was about to disappear. No, I answered calmly. You thought everything you wanted was about to disappear. She didn't deny it. Instead, she started crying even harder. Then, the truth finally came out. Wesley, her new husband, he's filing for bankruptcy. The bank is taking the house. They've frozen our accounts. My salon is closed. I've lost almost everything. Every sentence sounded like another brick falling from the life she'd chosen over ours. Ethan, I don't have anywhere else to go. There it was. The real reason for the phone call. Not love. Not regret. Need. She needed rescuing. Again, just like she'd expected me to rescue every problem during our marriage. I remained silent. She took my silence as hope. We had 16 beautiful years. I know I hurt you. But people make mistakes. We can fix this. We can start over. I looked down at the scar running through the center of my chest, the reminder of the day I'd almost died. No, one word. Quiet, calm, certain. She gasped. Ethan, please. I've changed. I smiled sadly. No. You've run out of options. Another silence. Then I spoke the words I'd carried inside me since the hospital. You didn't leave because you stopped loving me. You left because you thought someone else offered a better future. You served divorce papers while I was connected to heart monitors. You emptied bank accounts while I couldn't even lift my own head. You weren't escaping a bad marriage. You were chasing a better deal. Her crying became louder. No. I interrupted gently. I don't think you do. Because if you truly understood what you did, you never would have called asking for another chance. I stood and walked onto the porch. The evening breeze carried the scent of pine trees across the water. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel heavy. I honestly hope your life gets better, Vanessa. I don't hate you. I don't want revenge. But you will never again have a place in my life. She whispered my name one last time. Ethan, I love you. I closed my eyes. Years ago, those words would have meant everything. Now they meant nothing. Because love isn't proven when life is easy. It's proven in hospital rooms. It's proven when the future looks uncertain. It's proven when someone chooses to stay, even when there's nothing left to gain. You should have loved me when I needed you most. I ended the call. Then I calmly blocked her number. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. People often ask me if I ever got revenge. They expect some dramatic courtroom showdown, some brilliant plan, some crushing humiliation. The truth is, none of those things would have healed me. Because revenge doesn't always look like someone else losing. Sometimes, it looks like you finally winning. Nearly a year had passed since the day my heart nearly stopped beneath that bridge. If someone had told me back then that the worst day of my life would eventually become the beginning of my best one, I would have laughed. Now I understood. After months of legal battles, Olivia called me with the news we'd been waiting for. Ethan, she said, unable to hide the smile in her voice. It's over. I leaned back in my office chair. The judge ruled completely in your favor. The original settlement has been declared invalid. The court agreed that the documents signed while you were heavily medicated should never have been enforced. I closed my eyes, not because I cared about the money. Because, for the first time, someone in authority had looked at everything that happened and called it exactly what it was. A betrayal. The assets were redistributed fairly. The accounts were restored. The fraudulent transfers were reversed. Justice hadn't arrived overnight. But it had arrived. When I hung up the phone, I didn't celebrate. I simply walked outside. The autumn air felt lighter. So did I. For months I'd thought I was fighting to get my life back. The truth was, I'd built a far better one. I sold the old family home. Not because I couldn't bear to live there, but because some walls absorbed too much pain. Every room echoed with memories that no longer belonged to the man I'd become. Instead, I bought a quiet cabin overlooking a mountain lake. The kind of place where mornings begin with birdsong instead of arguments. Where silence feels peaceful, not lonely. My mother moved into the guest suite. She'd spent years making everyone else feel welcome. Now it was finally her turn to feel at home. Every Sunday, she baked fresh bread while filling the house with stories about my father. Stories I used to hear without truly listening. Now, I treasured every word. Marcus visited almost every weekend. We'd sit on the dock with fishing rods in the water, laughing about jobs we'd worked together over the years. One evening, he looked at me and smiled. "You know, you look younger now than you did before your surgery." I laughed. "I feel younger." "You miss her?" I thought about the question for a long moment, then I shook my head. "No, I miss the woman I believed she was. But she stopped existing a long time before she walked away." Marcus nodded. "I figured you'd say that." Meanwhile, life continued writing its own ending. Walter's bankruptcy became permanent. His business disappeared. The luxury developments were sold to repay creditors. Vanessa's salon closed its doors for good. Many of the friends who once filled her social calendar vanished as quickly as they had appeared. The people who had admired success never stayed for hardship. I never celebrated her downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching another human being suffer. But there was peace in knowing I no longer carried the weight of her choices. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't mean giving someone another chance. It means refusing to let their betrayal keep controlling your future. One crisp Saturday evening, I sat beside the lake watching the sunset paint the water gold. My dog rested beside my boots. My mother laughed inside the cabin. Marcus was cleaning fresh trout on the deck. The air smelled of pine trees and wood smoke. I realized something. A year earlier, I'd believed my life was over. Now, I couldn't imagine trading this life for the one I'd lost. Because losing Vanessa forced me to rediscover the man I'd forgotten. The quiet man. The hard-working man. The man who never measured success by expensive cars or impressive titles. The man my father had raised. Before leaving that evening, Marcus looked at me one last time. "So, if you could say one thing to Vanessa today, what would it be?" I smiled as the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the mountains. "I'd thank her." He looked surprised. "For showing me that anyone who only values you when life is easy never truly valued you at all. And for reminding me that the strongest bridges aren't the ones that never face storms. They're the ones built on foundations strong enough to survive them." I stood, took one last look across the peaceful lake, and walked back toward the warm lights of the cabin. Not as the man who had been abandoned. Not as the man who almost died, but as the man who had rebuilt his life stronger than ever before. And in the end, that was the only revenge that truly mattered. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable revenge story. Tell us in the comments, what do you think was Ethan's greatest victory, winning the court case? Rebuilding his life, or refusing to take Vanessa back? Until next time, remember this: the people who underestimate your worth often become the ones forced to watch your greatest success from a distance.